Hello, I'm just checking in here as part of the Regen Leadership course set up through Holistic Management Canada. And today's topic is regarding knowing where we have come from and understanding are we being successful on our journey. Now I thought it was fitting, I'm checking in here about a quarter mile away from where my great-grandfather settled over 100 years ago when he came over from Iceland. And as you can see, we've from my last post, we've just had our first kind of snowfall a few days ago. But anyway, I just thought it was fitting to know what success is. We need to know where we've come from. So here I am in my pasture, and Dana first talked about that farming is something that's new, right, in human history. Now this agriculture allowed for us to move from our hunter-gatherers and tribes to form states and countries. Now this allowed specialization, right? Moved towards individuals understanding the scientific method and helped us to understand many of our complex systems in this world we live. This structure also led to an organization structure that's led to higher levels of hierarchy compared to a flatter structure normal in tribes. Now, there's a book that I came across that talks about this transition from hunters and gatherers to modern civilization. It was called Against the Grain by James Scott. And he actually argued that this transition was not as much based on consent but more on violence. If you go back in history, when the early agrarian cultures occurred, this was based on often slavery as well as a peasant and serb and lord model. But this agrarian society actually has led to a decline in our living standards, and he talks through that this system is prone to collapse. So I just thought I'd note that to go along with what Dana talked about to understand where we've come from. After the agriculture revolution, we kind of transitioned to the industrial age, right, where we harnessed not just the power of the sun and the earth for agriculture, but now we've harnessed the power of fossil fuels. Another podcast that talks about this harnessing of energy, there was a guest, Graham Palmer, and he talked about if you can control the energy flow, you control the state of political power. Now, I thought this was an interesting connection to make as well, even back to the agrarian society, where that was really a story of storage of energy, as in grain, that fueled the many armies and slaves to get the job done. And today I feel that energy model is still partially has to play out at who controls the energy does control a bit of the political state of things. It was talked about in the class about this industrial era pushed society to focus on bigger and better forms of agricultural production. And it was taught a concept called the progress trap was mentioned. This was brought on from an author, Ronald Wright. Okay, this progress trap talked about improvements in efficiency often lead to other issues. And one example that was given was chicken production. We can really fatten up chickens very quickly, but this monoculture or individual species that's bred for production doesn't fare well when it comes to diseases as well as some animal welfare issues. And I feel this concern can be translated not just to the chicken sector, but the dairy, pork, and beef. These more centralized models are more efficient, but nature has a hard time dealing with a lot of the concentrations of waste, the high water usage, and the chemical inputs. So again, it was noted that many civilizations have failed in the past due to excessive water usage, and maybe we're on a different track again with this intensive form of agriculture fueled by the Industrial Revolution. Now, I think many of us have seen that we are pushing some of these planetary boundaries, and I think it's important to question that where we are headed, where we've come from and where we are headed, and sometimes to question those solutions that may come from these institutions that were part of creating the problem in the first place. So back to the initial question. How do we know that we are making progress, right? with the understanding of knowing where we've come from. So in my opinion, we need to shift away from the model that got us here, which is primarily based on power, profit, and control, and transition to a framework of truth, freedom, and health. Now, these terms are used to describe aspects of a system that I talked about in a few videos ago, which are the three critical parts, which are conversion, transport, and storage. Now, this concept of truth, freedom, and health, I didn't come up with this. I actually came across this from Dr. Shiva. He is the inventor of email and an engineering professor at MIT. And he has also recently ran for office as an independent candidate in this year's US presidential election. Now, to know we are on the right path, we need to ask ourselves whether this solution is coming from a deep understanding of systems and the interconnections of truth, freedom, and health. Now, these aspects apply to both information, matter, and energy, and it allows us to understand the many complex systems in nature from a holistic lens. So, first, freedom. Now, this is the ability to move freely, to communicate freely, and talk freely. Now, this allows us to convert ideas. Ideas form hypotheses, which then lead us to truth, which is basically the basis of science. Now, without freedom, you can't really get to truth. Without truth, we end up making up fake problems and fake solutions, which then result in us destroying our health and our environment. So without health, which is basically the infrastructure in us and our planetary system, we can't fight for freedom. So this is basically the summary of the truth, freedom, health model. So the other point of this model needs to come from the bottom up. Okay, this is a movement from the working class, a grassroots movement, and that this ensures that there's no corruption from these entities that are focused on power, profit, and control. So in my opinion, the forces of power, profit, and control are what have gotten us here. And I think if we can work on getting us out of this, shifting to these principles of truth, freedom, and health. So that's it. This was a bit long-winded, and I know I kind of went way back and then brought up a little different format again based on this truth, freedom, health model. But I think if we learn to look at things as a system and focus on these three terms, truth, freedom, and health, we will know that we are heading on the right path. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that video. A little long-winded, but again, I think it's important to bring in some of this to know where we have been and to know where we're going. Okay, take care and see you soon.